in summary, this talk will be a bit more about technical side of the games. So I'm trying to make it more relatable with an indie team. And yeah, welcome and thank you for like attending the event. All right, I'm not sure like how many people are relatable with these kind of like memes, let's say. So like maybe like some of you experience this issue where like, okay, I'm using Unreal Engine, I'm on the latest 5.7, I've enabled Nanite, Lumen, Megalites and everything, but then like, oh, why my FPS was like below 15? Some of them are like below 10. Isn't like all of this supposed to like help us with our FPS and our like performance? So that's what the talk gonna be roughly. Like I'm gonna tell a bit more like of the stories based on my recent experience in my latest project. And I think the talk, I'll format it a bit more of like a storyline setup. And it's basically more about like a confession of my mistakes that I made in the past 1 year. All right, so a little bit about myself before I start my confession. My name is Nathaniel Halim, but you can call me Nathan. I'm from Albright Studios, and my current role is a technical artist. And did anyone here are familiar with technical artist role? Okay, there's one. Nice. So yeah, I think technical artist is a role that is quite new in Malaysia, especially. And depending on the studios, the role could be like varies a lot. Some TAs do like a very specific role, like some of them are borderline shader artists. Some of them just do like a procedural related work, and some of them like kind of do everything. So basically, especially for like an indie team or like a mid to small size team, uh, what TA do will be more on like creating shaders, materials, setting up pipelines, helping with performance and optimization, building automated tools, making like some technical constraints for your tools, and basically like what TA do is a bridge between the devs and also the technicalities, especially with the artists as well. So you're not just making things looks good, but everything has to work and make sure everything is performant. Okay, so this is a little bit about my previous works. So I didn't start as a technical artist actually. I started as a 3D artist in Passion Republic about 7 years ago. And my first project is actually in Diablo 4. I started as a character artist and then moved into an environment artist. And then I get a chance to work on a few characters at Mortal Kombat 1, especially on the Animalities DLC. And I did work on like 2 Blizzard secret projects that unfortunately will never see the light of the day. And Katanarama was actually my first indie games that I worked on previously with the team in Ghost Machine, a really fun like small project. And along the journey of my career, I started to transition as a technical artist. Yes, this is where I started to transition to like a more technical artist role. First, I helped with Passion Republic games during my time in Passion Republic. So I started to help them with a little bit of like shader work, a little bit of like pipeline setup. And my last project that are more on the technical side are together with Naughty Dog, where I do like some things related with destruction, things with like simulation. But unfortunately, I can't show the project yet. And that's where I decided to turn into like a full-blown technical artist when I got the opportunity to work with Albright Studios. And currently I'm working on our small project that is called Project 12. All right, so since I'm gonna bring this story in about like more of a storyline format, so let me start with the most dangerous phase of the project, which actually is the beginning, where you start to make a lot of decisions. And a lot of my talks today is more gonna be like based on my experience with Project 12 that I did together with Albright Studios. And also along the slides, I'll share like a bunch of QR codes where you guys can actually take pictures, or you wanna scan the QR codes. That's where all of the links, all of the hopefully like useful informations are there. So yeah, let's start in the beginning. All right, so this is where everyone started in a project. So in this case, like when I started Project 12, like everyone was really excited about doing the project. Like some people start to like block out the level designer starts to like block out for like the level design, and some of the devs starts to like prototype the gameplay. Like everyone just want to contribute, right? Concept artists will start to like do some sketches, and usually at the early stage of the project, especially when I was in Project 12, we don't really want to set up like so much rules in a project. We just want to just do freestyle, right? Just make sure you manage to like, like do contribution, whatever you want to do, like freely. No rules, and everyone was like still in a core member kind of stage. So you probably only have like 5 or less than 10 people, a lot of experiments. So that's usually like where the project started. And in the next few slides, I'm gonna tell you guys also about what we did. what went wrong, uh, why, why it happened, and what should we've done. So yeah, let's start the story in the first chapter. All right, so this is the first mistakes that I made in Project 12, basically. So the project started, everyone starts to like populate things in the project. Uh, some people start to ask like, okay, where should I put this? Where should I put that? Do I need to create like a specific project? Because the team was very small. It was about 3 people back then, maximum 5 people. So we were all like, it's okay, just do whatever you want. We don't want to like restrain you too much. Just make sure you kind of like label it properly, which turned out to be like not really. Yeah, so that's what we did basically. Like a team is still very small, so and it's sometimes it's challenging because it's hard to decide when you were just starting. You really still like unsure. Okay, what do the project need? Are we gonna build like an open world? Sometimes it's not decided yet. Are we gonna have like 5 characters? Are we gonna have 2 characters? How much of a fidelity that we wanted? So it's understandable that it's hard to make like a lot of this decision early on. Right, so what went wrong? So a lot of things went wrong along the way, especially in the first few months. So as you guys can see here, because we don't have like any sort of structure in how do we set up the project. So you'll see like a lot of latest rig animation. Our character is called Helga, and as you can see, someone will tell me like, oh, can I get the shader for Helga? And I was like, okay, let me just search it up. You go to the root of your folder, and then you start to type out like Helga body material. And you found out there's like 3 different material with all 3 same names. That is the worst thing ever. And all of them are actually with a different setup. Some of them are even with a different master material. And to make things worse, when you want to check, okay, I want to get a default diffuse texture. And then when you search your default diffuse texture, I have 1, 2, 3, 6 different default texture. All have a somewhat similar naming. Some of them are in virtual texture, some of them are not. And this is like driving me nuts, right? Yeah, and this is the after effect. Basically, a lot of pain, like so many like problems. Like it's hard to debug because I say I need to check one of the Helga body's texture, and then when I check the referencing, I'll be like, okay, which Helga body? All 3 are in the same names. Everything are in different directories. Every one of them are with a different master material. And the worst thing is when you check referencing, it's just all over the place. So when you get to make a build, and then you realize like some of the assets are missing, you really have to dig really deep into the referencing. And the worst part that we recently faced is actually the refactoring hell, because when we want to move the project to Unreal 5.7, we started with Unreal 5.3. When we want to refactor and then we want to migrate textures, we want to migrate the shaders, you'll spawn like a bunch of like random random folders, and it's very hard to clean it up. And the worst thing is, the repair tool is me, myself. So a lot of team will like message me like, oh, can you move this folder? Can you like check this shader? It took a lot of time. So what would I do to like avoid that problem? So I'm not sure how many people here are familiar with version control. So even if you just work on a solo dev, I would highly encourage you guys to still use version control. You guys don't need to use like a very fancy version control, but at least use like something like Git, which is free. It's accessible for everyone. If you plan to like, if you know your project gonna scale up to like about 10, 20, or 30 people, I would recommend Perforce. Although like Perforce definitely come with a bit of a cost. Or what we are using now is Plastic SCM, which is owned by Unity. And I think until like a certain stage of like a project size is actually free to use. So for like an indie game that maybe you don't even need like 50 gig, you don't need like 100 gig, I would recommend Plastic. And the best part of Plastic is it's cloud-based. So you don't need like a dedicated server. You don't really need like a very big like DevOps team. And it's very artist-friendly. Okay, so for you guys, I'm a heavy Unreal user. So if you guys are using Unreal as well, and you guys kind of like, oh, where should I start? How should I do like a, where should I start to like set up the version control for my Unreal project? Please scan this link. So Unreal have a pretty good documentation on how you start and how you set up version control for your project. All right, so this is probably one thing that is overlooked by a lot of team, especially when you are like a small team, which is folder structure. So please guys, do not skip this step by any means. I think what happened in Project 12 was halfway during our vertical slice, our project was a mess. The foldering is a mess. And then I found out that this amazing guy called Michael Allar, feel free to scan the QR code. So he created like a base Unreal project setup with all of the naming conventions, all of the folder structure, and he also explained why you shouldn't have like a folder called texture, a folder called mesh, a folder called shader, because basically you need to force the team to like name things properly. So you know, like, okay, I want to look for a mesh. I just need to type like SM, for example, for static mesh. Or I just need to look for a master material. And you know, you just need to like type M underscore and you'll get all of your master material like in your search query. And the good thing about removing all of this like mesh folder, texture folder is that you will have a shorter file path, which it will helps a lot to like reduce like possibilities of like bug because you have like, I don't know, like 10 different root folders or like your folder is 20 folders deep, and that will cause a lot of issue in the build. Yes, and when you guys do use a version control, please dedicate like 1 or 2% to make sure they know what's going on in the branches. So this is what happened when you didn't dedicate anyone to control the branches, right? We were in a rush, and then you'll be like, okay, I'm gonna have like an emergency repair branch. And then when you were in that branch, you realize like, oh, I need to isolate for a bug. That's how you get an isolation one. In your isolation one, you realize like, there's another bug. You'll create an isolation 3, 4, and so on, right? And this is a mess. When your main dev want to make a merge, and then they realize they want to do a build, when they merge everything to the main branch, so you'll realize you have a lot of conflicts, and this might cost you like a lot of like lost effort and time. When there's a conflict, then you realize like, oh, I need to give up my changes. I need to like take the changes from the dev, and you might have to redo like a lot of progress and a lot of the work. All right, so we are going to the chapter 2. So in project 12, along the way, like we are doing well in our first playable prototype. We are very thankful for it. Project keeps going on, a lot of cool ideas. And now it's time to plan for our vertical slice. And then two of my devs was like, okay, let's start to make a test build, right? That's what we should do. And we haven't been doing it for like a very long time, honestly. So we were like, okay, let's initiate the build process we took from the main branch. And then we do it in our build machine, which is equipped with a 4080. And then the worst part is when the build is done, we are horrified that we don't even reach like a 24 FPS for like a game that is smaller than 30 gigabytes. And we are running it on a 4080. Like, how can this be, right? A 4080 with all of nanite, lumen, everything is enabled, and you can't even reach a 20 FPS. So yes, everyone was scared. I was really scared. And to make things worse, we have a lot of stutter, and our texture didn't actually load properly. So a lot of textures are blurry. Some of them really need to wait for like a few seconds to load. Yeah, so what we did is we were lucky that we have like a lot of good hardware. We were lucky that we are like doing well where we can afford like a pretty decent hardware. In general, most of us are using 5070 now for a AA game project. I think the lowest spec we have was a 4070 Ti and also a 5060. But I think another thing that we are trying to leverage is asset packs, right? We have a lot of asset packs, and a lot of people forgot that when you download and use an asset packs, they are by default was set up in the highest setting, meaning you will get like 8K texture, 10K texture. So can you imagine like in a level that you don't even play in a native 4K resolution and you load a 10K texture, multiple 10K texture. So that's how I realized like our performance are actually dying on the inside. So what went wrong? So of course, FPS really tanked. Although you are using like a 4080, some of us are using like a 5080, performance are horrible on a build. To make things worse, we realized a lot of unoptimized assets. They are all in 8K, and I think the highest or the biggest texture that I found out along the way was actually 10K texture, if you could believe that, for like a small props. And then, I think there's the two major points here of what is going wrong. First is actually low performance awareness. So every artist that are working on the project, they were really excited. They really want to make sure everything looks amazing, everything looks good. So they just spam everything in 4K, everything is in 8K, and there's no sharing texture. Every shaders are unique. So the game does looks good, but of course performance suffers. And I think another worst thing happened was that editor playtest was really bad, to the point that when you open your editor, everything was like really slow. And that discouraged a lot of playtesting in editor. So our iteration time also like slows down a lot. Because when people like making a new path, I was like adding a new asset, and then I was like, okay, let's test the game. Then to load and start the game, it took us like a minute, like a 2 minutes. So people are getting lazy, right? People will be like, okay, it's okay. I'm not gonna test it now. Everything was so slow. We'll do it later. And it compounds. Yeah, so playtest rarely happens. So what happened is that our game quality suffer because when at the end of the week or usually at the end of the month, we'll be like, okay, let's make another build. And we realize like, oh, the path doesn't work. It's not fun to play. The pacing was wrong. And all of this was caused by the editor is having like a very bad performance. And what happened is you discourage people to actually play and test in editor. Even the dev will be like, okay, I'm just gonna test the AI in our own gym, in our own specific gym. The artists that do the asset, they'll be like, okay, I'm just gonna put in the asset and that's it. But you never actually play test the game. So what happened is our environment suffer with a lot of collision issues because the artist never test. And then when our dev actually put in the AI, then we realized like, oh, the nav mesh was not set up properly. So what happened is the AI will never come and chase at you. And then we realized like certain AI behavior is actually blocked by the level. Like some AI, we know they couldn't jump, but we put a lot of verticality in the level. So player will just like camp on the higher ground and you can just kill the AI easily. So this will affect a lot of your game quality. So what would I do now to tackle all of this issue? Okay, so this is something that maybe a lot of indie team are overlooking, which is to set your target platform as early as possible. And I would recommend you guys to use a Steam hardware survey. I know if some of you guys just aim to release in the in the console straight out, then it's a lot simpler in a sense. Once you guys have the dev kit, that's all. There's not a lot of variables. You guys won't have like a lot of like unknowns because every every Nintendo Switch are the same, every PS5 are the same. But the problem is when you guys want to aim for like a PC build, that's where you guys will start to think, right? Okay, I'm building like, for example, like an indie game, probably something like Hollow Knight, for example. And then you'll be like, okay, what are the most used hardware or what is the hardware that is generally used by a PC user? So I would recommend you guys to open this link. Steam has a survey every other, like I believe every month or every other month, I forgot. But you can open this survey form, like not survey form, sorry, this link. And then when you see, you can tell like, okay, the most used hardware for like now is let's say like a 5060 or like a 4060. And you can see whether the 4060 is a mobile or is it a desktop hardware. And also like RAM is very expensive now. You really need to know like, okay, if people today can only afford like 8 GB of RAM maximum on average, then ideally if you want to reach a bigger audience, your game should utilize less than 8 GB of RAM. Because if your game requires like a minimum 16 GB, that could be like an entry barrier for your user and for your player as well. This is also a really critical lessons that I learned in the past 1 year, which is a regular performance check. So as a TA, you do need to like build a lot of pipelines. You need to do like and build a lot of shader. But this is also like another critical part of the job as a TA, which is to check your game from a performance point of view regularly. Like some TA do it every week, some TA do it every month, depending on your project requirements. So why do we do this like regularly? I would say the best analogy to explain it was just like your car. You want to bring your car to the workshop at least every like few months, or at least based on what is recommended by your car manufacturer, which is the same with your games. You're hoping to catch any problem early. So imagine if the previous issue of like our texture didn't load properly, I get to catch it in the first month. Then when we do like our second or third build, everything will be smoother. To avoid realizing like big problems during the milestone as well, that is very important. So imagine you are like 2 weeks from a milestone, and then you realize like, oh, our performance dropped below our target FPS. Then that will cause a lot of issue and that will cause a lot of overtime as well. And also to improve your pipeline, maybe like you need to see what's the issue. Like one of the issue that we realized was that our virtual texture didn't actually work. We skipped all of our our virtual texture. And the problem is that you need virtual texture to make nanite and lumen work properly and on performant. So yeah, please do like a regular performance checkup. And for the indie teams here, or for you guys that are just starting in the gaming development, I would recommend to check this link, which is a game optimization guide by Ben Cloward on YouTube. It's a very good place to start and learn about optimization, where the whole playlist will give you like a step-by-step guides for both Unity and Unreal. So regardless of which game engine you are using, please check this guy out. And also regarding on that, please do a regular build. Even if you are like a solo single dev, like your team was probably just 1 or 3 people, yeah, please do like a regular build, maybe like once a week or like every milestone if you have like a more lenient work pacing. So you guys will realize that your performance in editor and in build are pretty much quite different, probably about 20 to 30% different. So if let's say your performance in the editor was like 100 FPS, usually your build will have about 30% improvement of the performance, just because in the build, your game doesn't have to run the editor. Yeah, and hopefully you get to catch problems early as well. Like when we do our second build in Project 12, we realize a lot of assets are missing, a lot of shaders are missing. And then you realize it was actually caused by the shader error that we never get to catch. So the more you do your build and you get to check it, actually is a very healthy cycle to like keep in check with your final product, right? How people will receive your product, how gamers will actually see your games. Okay, so this is chapter 3, which means we are halfway there. So considering our FPS problem in Project 12, so I start to like do my detective job, right? I start to open every single stats I could find out, start to open every single like render passes that I could check. And then we realized that there are so many things that are going wrong. And all of them are not about just simply like an optimization, but we realize it's more fundamental, which is on the editor setting itself. So if you guys remember on the chapter 1, we all decided to like, okay, let's just keep Unreal as vanilla as it is. We don't want to put a lot of like constraints or like, holding back the devs and all of the people that are contributing in the project. So everyone focus on awesome, making things awesome. We test a lot of things and we realize there's a lot of like the experimental left over as well. And the editor is still in its vanilla state, right? And we bring a lot of assets that are coming from like Unreal version 4. Some of them are from an even older Unreal, some of them are from Megascans, and all of them have different specification. This really hit us hard when I was developing Project 12. Like along the way, we are like, okay, I don't get it. Like everything just doesn't work. Nanite didn't do his job. Lumen didn't do his job. So does Megalites. We realized what went wrong was a lot because we never spec up the editor from the start. So does Unreal Vanilla actually works? Yes, but with a lot of caveats. So these are like a few things that really killed our performance. First of all, our VSM didn't actually work. This is caused by the light settings that we have in editor. And also like some people, or like I didn't realize back then, where if you use a nanite, you can't use world position offset in your shader and in your material, just because whatever asset that is converted to a nanite asset, they can't really move, they can't really bend. They have to be like a very static asset. You can't even bind a skeleton there. And also we have way too many unique materials. And this is also, I would say, like a constraints of nanite. Ideally, if let's say you have like a 5,000 asset with nanite, you should have like maybe just 1 or 2 master material. While they can be instance, but ideally you shouldn't have too many like material variation. Which I think along the investigation in Project 12, we realized we have about 500 unique materials for like a single level. So yeah, that really like destroyed our performance. So yeah, this is the After Effects. Of course, again, performance tank. And our game actually utilized an open world setup where we actually utilize the latest FastGeo plugin that is developed together with Witcher 4 and is shipped by default in Unreal 5.7. So please check it out, guys. Everything is really accessible in Unreal now. And we realized we have a lot of gameplay hitches. So when we load to like a certain area, the game will stutter, your character will stop moving, and then only slowly the world loads, right? And so yeah, this is a guide that helped me a lot while developing Project 12, which is, this is a YouTube video titled Virtualize Everything from Unreal Gold Coast in 2024. So this is where we realized like, okay, to ship Project 12, which is a game with a little bit of like sense of realism, it's not really stylized. We do need to utilize Nanite, Lumen, and everything that Unreal has to get to like the quality that we wanted. And apparently to do that and having like a good performance in Unreal, you need to virtualize everything to make sure that your shadow maps are actually virtualized, to make sure that your texture are actually in a virtual texture configuration. Don't use like a normal texture that is not virtualized. And also to utilize Nanite on top of that, especially for everything that couldn't move and doesn't move, right? So you guys can watch this video. This video will give you like a good run through, okay, how do you virtualize everything in your project if you need to have that feature in your Unreal Engine. Yeah, so what would I do now? I think generally I need, or I wish like 5 months ago I know the system better. So I think the analogy that I would say for this problem is that when you drive like a fancier car or like a faster car, actually it doesn't mean that you'll be like a better driver, and it doesn't mean you'll drive your car faster anyway if you don't really understand what are the system you are using. Okay, so in chapter 2, I told you guys to like make sure to spec your target hardware, and this is why you really need to spec up your target hardware early on your project, because once you spec up your target hardware, you'll get to make a lot more smarter decisions. For example, you are making like a Pokemon-like games, and you are targeting like Switch 2 or like Switch 1, and from there you realize that okay, if I want to target like a Switch hardware, I might not need Lumen, I might not need the Megalights, I do need Nanite, and my game is like, let's say it's stylized something that maybe looks like Pokemon. So yes, and that will make you like able to like do a lot of like smarter decisions, because you realize that okay, I don't really need certain system, and I think you can ask yourself as well, like, do I need AAA pipeline where each character has a normal map, each environment has a unique shader? And I think it's interesting where I found out that Pokemon game only has ambient occlusion technology today, right, in their latest game that are not released yet. So depending on your game, you might not need AO for the past 30 years like Pokemon, or if you're trying to deliver a game that look like Uncharted 4, or maybe looks like Assassin's Creed, then maybe yes, you'll need like a really good system set it up in the editor. So I want to share one thing with you guys as well. So this is about mobile custom post process on LinkedIn. So you guys can scan the QR. And I think this is interesting where I learned if you want to port your game to mobile actually share the same bus or the same memory between GPU and CPU. So what happened is even the smallest post process, if it's not optimized properly, it will like kill your performance very quickly. So if you scan this post, this is a post from LinkedIn. It really explains how you can optimize your post process, why you need a custom post process and not using the default post process. And this is all because of the hardware limitation, right? So if you already set from the start that you want to ship your game for a phone, then this should be like a very critical consideration when you set up the whole pipeline. Okay, I know a lot of people hates reading, especially if you are like an artist kind or if you are like the creative people. But please guys, if you are technical artists, if you want to touch the technical side of game dev, please read the documentation. I realized when people were having a lot of issue, I think there's one problem in my previous project where people were like, okay, why I have 500 chain set in my, back then we were using plastic, because plastic will automatically detect like things that are changing, right? So we were doing on a single level, and then the artist was asking me like, oh, why do I have like 500 different chain set? I'm just working on a level. I just move things around, but I have like 500 plus chain set. Then we found out we were enabling OFPA, which is one file per actor. It's a feature in Unreal Engine. And that's where I realized like, okay, basically if I actually study the documentation properly, you could learn a lot. You could set up the system way earlier based on like all of your previous constraints and all of your previous decision making. And also like, I've told you guys in Projectile, we are utilizing open world like system, which is the fast geo. And then we have like a lot of starters for like a very small map. So I start to dig around, then I realized in Unreal documentation, they actually stated, okay, if you guys are using like an open world setup for Unreal, you are actually doing a world partition for your level. You can also utilize this system called PSO pre-caching, where every time you do like a playtest, they'll have like a cache built in your playtest, and then you can actually merge back that playtest to your main branch or to your main project. And that's how Unreal like smartly learn like, okay, player usually open the chest very early on. So they know like before player reach to the chest or to the loot box, they have to load the shader way earlier. So that's how you tell Unreal of like how player in your game behaves, and Unreal will smartly actually adjust their system. They will know like, okay, which shader should they load first, which shader should they load later on. Okay. And yes, so if you guys are like a world builder especially, please check this link as well. It's Unreal's documentation on world building. That's how I figure out like, okay, we actually need to enable the fast geo plugin, we actually need to enable the PSO pre-caching, And that's how I realized that the issue of that 500 random change set with a lot of gibberish name is actually the one file per actor. Because what happened is if you move like a single chair there, that single chair will be considered as like its own individual changes in your version control. So the cool thing is multiple artists can work on the same area together as long as they didn't touch the same asset, right? So yeah, everything is in this documentation. Please check it out. Okay, this is the last one. So with all of these features and all that, then I start to realize like, oh, actually I didn't do a lot of tech artwork. Half of the time I'm actually chatting with people on Slack and also like doing debugging because people will be like, oh, I can't do the build. I can't open the project. So I realized like this is actually a big problem and it's been eating a lot of my time. So what happened? So we started as a small team, which is less than 5 people. So everyone kind of knows everything. The way we built our project was actually using a custom bat file. So everyone knows what is a bat file, how to run it, and things are not set in stone yet. So things are keep changing. So we don't really have a documentation. And we assume that everyone in my team knows what you should do, right? If your editors spew out certain kind of errors, we're like, okay, you should know what happened there. Which actually not really the case, because the more we onboard a lot of people, especially when we onboard a lot more on the creative sides, people that are like, just want to make awesome art, right? I just want to make an awesome environment, an awesome animation. So a lot of times when your documentation are not clear enough, like for example in this image, I'm telling people to like, okay, you need to get the latest version of Unreal 5.7.x, but then in my image there's 5.4.4, which actually just because I'm so lazy to delete my Unreal version and add a new one, because when you already have like a 5.7.4 in your project, you will never get 574 in your drop-down list. And this causes a lot of confusion, as small as a problem is this is. So waste a lot of time. I have to help a lot of people. And also a lot of pipeline has a lot of hiccups because each asset, some of them are nanites, some of them are not, because we'll never do like a proper documentation for the asset pipeline. And I think at the worst of this problem was that when we onboard a new people, it will take us about 2 to 3 days just to onboard someone fully into the project, which is kind of unreasonable actually for like a very small team. Yeah, so this is where I start to get my PTSD going on. So every time I saw like a build and an error, these two words in the same sentence, I start to having like small nightmares on the night before I go to sleep. So yes, I took a lot of time to just communicate and debug a lot of things. And I realized a lot of same problems coming over and over again and again. And yeah, sometimes people just couldn't open the engine and that stops them from working, right? So a lot of time are wasted there. So what would I do now? So at first, when you guys want to start a documentation, don't be too fixated on where you should do the documentation. Should I do it on Slack? Should I do it on a notepad? Should I do it on a Microsoft Word? It depends on your needs. If let's say you know you have a lot of partners or like people outside your company that you need to send your documentation to, then maybe picking up a platform where you can maintain the security and then making sure everything is on the cloud would be a better option. But if let's say you guys know you guys are all a very small team, then maybe Notepad will do, right? Like a small group chat, free group chat, maybe in a Discord, upload everything in a Notepad. That will do as well. And the most important thing is make sure your documentation are as simple as possible. So if you guys see the image here, this is a problem with my bat file documentation back then, because a lot of people are not used to coding. So if I didn't spell it out like word by word to make sure everything is very clear, people will start to have a lot of assumption. And the problem with technical stuff, especially if you are in the dev side, in technical work, you couldn't assume things. You need to make sure that every word and every characters and alphabet are staying like consistent. So back then in our project, a lot of people will forgot and delete the apostrophe like symbols there, and then they'll come to me like, oh, I couldn't build the project, I couldn't run the editor. Then I have to like ask them, can you send me your bat file, check them. I'm almost like a teacher checking your homework. And I was like, oh, I start circling like a small words like where, okay, you are missing this character, you have like too many space in your bat file. So yeah, make sure your documentation is as easy to understand as possible. Yeah, so this is the end of the talk. Thank you for bearing with me with all of these technical words and jargons. So and then, what would I do if I have to build another game tomorrow? So when you start a project, yes, you will start and you will, what is it? You will most likely decide to like not change too much of a things in Unreal Engine or in Unity. But do make sure you have some sort of folder structure. At least you know, like, okay, art assets should be placed inside a single folder, and then blueprint should be in a single folder. So I will definitely recommend you guys to do like a style guide. So when people start and they jump into your project, at least they know, like, okay, I'm a shader artist. I know where my shader should live on. I'm a dev, I'm a programmer. I know where my blueprint should live on. And doing this early will save you a lot of time and a lot of like stress. Also, don't forget to set up your target hardware. Are you building it for Switch 3, PS6, or are you doing it for mobile? And even for mobile, are you doing it for iOS? Are you doing it for like a Android system? This will change a lot of your decision making, especially from the technical side. Don't forget to use the Steam survey database to decide also if you are building for PC, whether you are on an NVIDIA, AMD, and that will make you able to test, right? Because from our experience as well last time, when we run our build on an AMD system, actually we found out that we have a lot of bugs just because AMD used a different rendering driver. Yeah, do your system setup. Like, do you need Nanite? If you're shipping a game that looks like a Mario game, or maybe it looks like Hollow Knight, you definitely don't need Nanite and Lumen and all of those fancy stuff. Probably you can trim your Unreal to be very efficient. And I think understanding the fundamentals of the system that you need and you will use is very important. So I want to share like a LinkedIn post here as well. So for you guys that are curious, like, okay, how many shadow maps that game usually like utilize? So you guys can scan the link. Apparently there's 3 types of shadow maps. So knowing all of this, you know, like, okay, this kind of shadow maps, you could do it for your mobile build. Maybe the other type of shadow maps will only work for your PC build, for example. Yeah, so do review and test regularly as well. So maybe you guys start to realize there's this word that keeps repeating in my slide, which is as early as possible. So I know I'm a TA, I've been in a few projects, and I realize you are lazy, right? You'll be like, okay, why do I have to start writing this boring documentation on the second day of the project? But trust me, when you try to minimize the chaos from the start, it will save you a lot of time and effort, and you guys get to focus on the fun aspect of game dev, right? You get to test the game more often, you get to think more on your ideas instead of like fixing folders and references, and also like cleaning up namings, duplicates, and all of those like boring stuff. So you will never be able to avoid mistakes 100%. Obviously, there will always be mistakes, there will always be problem. But what I hope from this talk, you guys get to like develop a really cool games, and also you guys to get having fun while making your games with making like as little mistake as possible. So that's all from my talk. Thank you for coming. And let's do a QA session.
Hi. I may have a few questions regarding Unreal Engine 5. So the main thing people hear about Unreal Engine 5 is the optimization, especially the storage space and the performance tank. So is this usually an engine issue or a developer issue? What do you think?
I think that's a very common question, but I would say it's not about engine issue for sure. And the reason why I'm saying that, if you see Witcher, they decided to jump into Unreal Engine. Final Fantasy VII Remake is on Unreal Engine. So I would say, imagine you were driving like a very sophisticated cars, right? Unreal is like a very advanced car. And the problem is, if you didn't know how to utilize the system properly, that's where all of the performance issue, the budgets are blowing up, your game have a lot of like FPS drops, stutters. But I believe it's not simply about the engine. It's just that Unreal was a complicated engine, just like how every other engine is. And then I think the weakness of Unreal is they will enable a lot of things by default, and that catch a lot of developers from the get-go. But then when you understand, like, okay, I don't need Nanite, I don't need Lumen, I don't need this and that, and that's where you get to optimize your game properly. Although, yes, Unreal do have like a few weaknesses, but I think my short answer is it's on the dev to actually understand the engine that you are using, especially if you are using Unreal.
Actually, I heard rumors, not sure rumors or data. They say using blueprints will affect the performance. Is it correct?
Yes, that's a fact. But actually, even if you see Clear Obscure, they are actually shipped mostly on blueprints. So that is more about how smart you as a developer to kind of like, solve your own like project specific problems. Because I've seen a lot of like very, very good cases like Claire Obscure, a very successful game. Most of their setup are in blueprints. They are not doing a lot of stuff in codes.
Then last one about development cycle. So also most AAA games that work on Unreal Engine 5 usually took a long time for the games to develop, like 5 years, 6 years. So how will you manage, how like find a way to shorten this development time? Is it possible? Do you think it's possible now? Or you have to accept it's just 5 years for each game now?
Yes, I think it's very possible, but also I think it's more of a scope issue and also like how much do you want to achieve with a project. So for example, you want to do like a triple A like Witcher, then 5 to 6 years with about 1,000 plus people, that's the norm. But if let's say you see another project, maybe like most of the indie project that you are looking at here, or even the game jam there, some of them maybe you are using Unreal Engine as well, but it took them like weeks or like months, right? So I think in terms of development cycle, it's always based on like what kind of project you want to ship. Are you trying to ship a triple A, double A, like an indie platformer that are mostly sprites, or are you even like shipping a top-down games? It depends, right? But in terms of speeding up the development cycle, especially if you are a more techie guys, then there's a lot of ways. Like maybe utilizing asset pack is one. Maybe you could do a lot of automated system. Maybe utilize a lot of PCG that could help and speed up things a lot.
Hello, Nathan. I have a general question about technical artists. I know technical artist is like a really big role. There's no like clear path to it. But if you were to like start your journey again, of let's say technical artist is you're zero and you want to become a technical artist, what will you like? How will you do it? Will you focus more on optimization or more on VFX or etc.? Yeah.
All right, good question. I think if I have to really start again from zero, how I will strategize it, I will pick like a studio that I wanted to join. Let's say if you are trying to get a job, maybe I'm trying to get a job in a PlayStation Studios, for example. I'll start and look at their technical artist requirement and then try to build a skill set that will fit that technical artist role. And another thing I will do is I will find as much TA jobs posting and then try to find the average. Let's say all of them will ask you to like, okay, know a little bit of Python, know a little bit of C++, you're familiar with shader, and those are the key points that I will first try to get myself comfortable with to start. Yeah, that's what I will do if I start over.